So we're going to take a brief look here at the social world in the New Testament. In particular, I'm just going to look at issues dealing with politics and with family. Again, we could talk an awful lot about society and about different aspects of the social world, but just to give a brief look at a couple of key factors that are important to be mindful of when reading the New Testament. So first of all is the Roman and Palestinian political context of the time. Of course, some of the important Roman emperors is Augustus, so from 31 to 31 BCE to 14 CE. And this is the emperor who is in charge at the time that Jesus is born. Of the Palestinian rulers during that time as well as Herod the Great. After Herod's death, his son Archelaus takes over Jerusalem and Judea. Herod's kingdom gets divided up, and the other part of his kingdom goes to his son Herod Antipas. So he's in charge of Galilee. He is tetrarch, which means a fourth ruler. And he has a fourth of the kingdom of Herod. And you can see that he reigns from 4 BC to about 39 CE. So throughout Jesus' life, Herod is the one in charge of Galilee. And so understanding Herod and understanding Herod's political, economic activities is quite crucial for understanding the beginning of the Jesus movement. We also have Philip, he's tetrarch of Erythea and Troglodytis, kind of a minor figure as far as the New Testament is concerned. So those is him. The next major Roman emperor is Tiberius. So you see his dates are kind of from 14 CE. So he is the emperor at the time of Jesus' ministry, whereas Augustus, Octavian, is the emperor during the time of Jesus' birth. Tiberius is in charge during the time of Jesus' kind of ministry. And some of the Palestinian rulers we begin to have after Archelaus. You see, Archelaus was only ethnarch until 6 CE, and the Romans decided that he was not able to maintain order in Judea, and so they started to replace the control of Judea to procurators or governors. And so some of the procurators or governors during this time is Valerius Gratus, and then, of course, the more famous Pontius Pilate from 26 to 36 CE. Caligula is kind of a very unusual emperor, quite a madman. You can see he had a short period of time, but caused a great deal of threat during the time that he was emperor. We also have Herod Antipas, who continues to rule over Galilee during this time. Claudius is the emperor during 41 through 54 CE. So this is kind of during the time beginning of Paul's ministry. The early church is beginning to develop. So it's developing under Claudius. There is a significant issue that occurs in Rome under Claudius, where he expels what we think are probably Christians. And so that sets up something of the stage for Paul's interactions with Aquila and Priscilla in Corinth, and also the occasion once Claudius dies, the expulsion of Jewish Christian ends, and they return back to Rome, and that may be part of the occasion for the a letter to the Romans. So other Palestinian rulers, we have Herod Agrippa I, kind of king of Palestine. The Romans typically didn't like the term king, but granted this to Herod Agrippa. Again, we also have some procurators that are in charge. There's Herod Agrippa II. Again, these are more probably important for references in the book of Acts than probably anywhere else. So it's under Claudius that we get Paul's many of the Pauline epistles written, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. James is probably written as well under the Claudius's period. There is, of course, Nero, a major Roman emperor. Some of the other Pauline epistles during this time are the letter to the Romans. We have Ephesians and Colossians, if they are written by Paul, written during this time. Philemon, Philippians, First and Second Timothy and Titus, if they're written by Paul, are likely as well during this time. First and Second Peter, if they are written by Peter, would also be occurred this time. Church tradition tells us that both Paul and Peter are executed during the time of Nero persecution, so they would have died sometime before 68. Then there's a period of turmoil in the Roman Empire with different people at different times who claim to be emperor but last usually for months. And it's probably during this time that we have Mark that is being written. Other major Roman emperors are Vespasian, and it's during his time that we probably have Matthew. I think Luke, most likely Luke and Acts are written during this period. Jude is probably written during this time as well as Hebrews. Then we have the Emperor Titus, during which time the Gospel of John, 1st and 2nd, 3rd John are likely written. And then we have Domitian, who is from 81 to 96 CE, and it's during this time that Revelation is written. So having something of the political context in which these books were written, what's going on throughout the empire, can be helpful. Definitely for a book like Revelation, and likely for the Gospels like Matthew, maybe for Paul's writing to the Romans. These things will be helpful. A key concept for understanding a society is the idea of honor and shame. As you read through De Silva, you're going to find that he will make a lot out of these concepts. It's important to remember that in the ancient world, honor is determined along the lines of how a person embodies the values or virtues of the community. In other words, it's culture. If you act outside of those values or virtues, you will end up acquiring shame. In antiquity, sexual purity, modesty, and submission are particular virtues that signified a woman as a person of honor. An important step occurred when Christianity took the dishonoring crucifixion of Jesus and turned it into a symbol indicating a death of honor. So Jesus has an honorable death because he is courageous. He doesn't buckle under pressures to denounce what he is doing or how he is acting and what his action indicates about himself. And he faces that crucifixion with courage and ability. And so what should be a sign of shame and dishonor, because he's not acting in submission to Roman authority, is taken by Christians as an indication of Jesus' faithfulness to God. Family life is also another important thing to keep in mind when thinking about early Christianity. The purpose of marriage was to fulfill the command to be fruitful and multiply as far as Jews were concerned, and to secure the honor of the family by having children and leaving a legitimate heir for the future. Now, that's true for both the Hellenistic world as well as within the Semitic context. Jewish marriages were usually arranged to occur with one's own kinship. This is what's known as endogamy, but not violate the law prohibiting incest. So you can't be too close. In other words, you can't marry your sister, you can't marry your first cousin, but you marry someone within the broader extended family. Roman marriages were often arranged for social advancement, in other words, gaining that honor. So you try to marry someone who can help you do that, particularly for the upper classes, maybe not so much for the lower classes. But you do want to make sure that the marriage is an honorable one and that the wife is faithful and can bear children who become legitimate heirs of any properties that the father may have. The purposes for marriage are oftentimes seen very differently than the way that marriages are seen in much of Western culture. where people marry because they find a soulmate or they find someone that they love, they find some kind of emotional connection to them. Those things are not really as play as strongly in the marriages of the first century. Among Jews, divorce was generally initiated by the husband only, and usually it occurred because of adultery or infertility. Because once again, you were to have marriage to have legitimate children, and if your wife is engaged in adultery, then the children that you might have become suspect, whether they are your children or not. And if she is infertile, then she can't bear you children, and you need to have children in order to leave your property. So those are reasons why a person may divorce. Family life in the first century, each member of a family should demonstrate solidarity with the family, cooperate with it to maintain the family's honor. The family should be a unified social network, so you don't really want to tolerate rebelliousness, insubordination. You need to maintain shared values, shared religious identity. Women were to devote themselves to the private affairs of the home. They were to be silent in public where men are present, and they are to model modesty and purity are the key virtues that are expected of women. Whereas with men, the vice that are oftentimes associated with men is anger. With women, the vice that they're most concerned was immodesty, impurity, sexual impurity. In the ancient world, family identity revolved around the household, and the husband represented that household. So maintaining order was important in the Greco-Roman context, and if a man did not maintain order within his household, he was seen to be dishonorable. And so a person's identity is closely intertwined with their family background. Who's your daddy? Who's your family? What family are you kind of connected with? And that is why when important people are being described, their genealogy is significant to report. So we have genealogies for Jesus, and having a genealogy is indicating something of his importance, his status, why he is an honorable person. So that's just a touch on some of the kind of important social dynamics, the political one and the family, and maintaining one's life and behavior in line with honor and shame.